let's go back to income for a minute.
Okay.
So income qualification, how about, do spousal support and child support count? And if they do in a divorce situation, what do people need to know? Do they get divorced and then the next day they can go buy a house?
So
Okay.
you can use support as qualifying income. You need your signed separation agreement and divorce decree. Signed separation agreement or court order. And it must reference the exact amount of the support in a dollar figure, and it must also reference the time frame, and the time frame must be monthly. So this is really important because sometimes we see that support is, I'm going to pay my spouse 25% of my annual bonus. Well, that's neither a dollar figure and it's also not monthly. If it instead says, I'm going to pay my spouse $3,000 a month, we can then use that for qualifying income. Whereas the first example, it could be a large amount of money, but because of the way it's written, we're not able to use that to qualify you for mortgage.
Okay. All right. Excellent. And then I noticed that you said that with self-employed people, they need to show the history, like they have to have the tax return and different things like that. Is there anything we need to know about spousal or child support? Do you have to have had a track record of this, or it's the ink is dried and now we're off to the races?
Right. So as Patrick said, so there's three parts to using support as qualifying income for a mortgage. The first, which Patrick just talked about, is the signed separation agreement or court order.
Okay.
The second is that you have to have a 6-month history of receiving the support.
Okay.
The 6-month history has to be from an account just in the paying person's name into an account just into the person who's receiving it. It cannot be any different. So do not do this. Michelle, you keep the BB&T account, and I'm going to keep the M&T account, but we don't take our names off our other person's name. Right. Believe me, we've tried. Hey, underwriter, look, you can see all of these transactions are mine. They're not Michelle's. Like, it's clear. Nope. If Michelle's name's on there, they won't use it.
Right.
So really important that from an account in just one person's name into an account in just the other person's name. The second part of that history is that it has to be consistent and the same amount every month. So again, here's what you should not do. Michelle, I know you're paying me $3,000 a month in support. Thank you very much. But I owe you $500 for something that you paid for that I'm supposed to pay for. So instead, this month, just give me $2,500. Mm-hmm. Never do that. Mm. It has to be just instead, send them $500. So same amount every month. Even good if it's around the same time of the month, but that's not required. But it must be within the month. You may not skip a month, or you got to start all over again on your 6-month history. And then the third thing is that the support has to continue for at least 3 years after application. So if you think about that, then you kind of need 4 years because you need to build a 6-month history. You need 3 years after application, and you can't know that you're going to go under contract or start your refinance the day, that this works. So you got to have a little bit of wiggle room. So in reality, you probably need 4 years in order to be able to use the support. For child support, we look at the kid's age and we look at the agreement because some jurisdictions go to 21, some 18, some are negotiated. Like I've seen it negotiated differently. So we're looking at that. And then obviously for alimony, it's very clear in the agreement when it ends. Okay. The other thing is that for your support history for your going forward, is that we're going to use the lowest of the 3 years. So here's an example. I had one client who was getting $3,000 in year 1, $2,000 in year 2, $1,000 in year 3. I could only use $1,000 for qualifying income. In that case, she didn't qualify at $1,000. Fortunately, this was a case that was not in court. It was alternative dispute resolution. And so we went back to the team and said, okay, how about if we do $3,000 in year 1, $1,500 in year 2, $1,500 in year 3. I had already made sure that she qualified for that. So same amount of money, but just divided up differently. And again, the goal for this couple was that they wanted one of them to be able to stay in the house. So they came to an agreement that would work. So That's also really important. We don't really care about year 4, 5, 6. We're only looking at those first 3 years.
Okay, that's excellent information.
And then
So-
there's one other piece to that that's also very cool. Here's another good thing. I know I give a lot of bad news in this, but because support is not taxed, so neither child support or alimony is taxed now, we can gross up that income. So if I'm receiving $1,000 a month of support, regardless of what kind it is, for qualifying purposes, it's $1,250, 125%. And that's just to make it equal to all the other income that we look at, which is taxed. So I'm only still getting $1,000. That doesn't change. But it's really, really helpful because like $4,000 a month of support is $5,000 a month of qualifying income, and that can make a big difference.